Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to this edition of Positive Pulse. This is a Brookfield Properties initiative, and today's session is on your financial health. What's our aim? Simple: to cut through the confusion and help you protect your savings and investments. And why just protect? We want you to make the most of all the opportunities that any crisis throws up. We have with us a very special guest, Monica Hullen. She's the best-selling author of the book Let's Talk Money, and she, of course, is one of the best-known financial literacy voices in the country. Monica Hullen, thank you very much for joining us on the Positive Pulse.
Thank you so much, Manisha. Pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here.
So today we already have a list of questions, and I think we have more than 250 registrations from across our business parks, which is Candor Tech Space, Equinox, and Powai Business District. So we've got some very interesting questions from young people as well, and of course people who have lots of money to seek out some opportunities. I'm going to start with, I think, a question which Deep Mukherjee asked, and I have it on my mind as well. The core of financial planning, Monica, is that you must have an emergency fund for situations like this, right? Which are unforeseen in anybody's life. This time around, though, have financial planners changed that quantum which is defined as what is the adequate emergency fund to have?
It's a fantastic question. I think everybody, every financial planner, every thinker, writer, researcher in this space has gone back to the drawing board to say, did our 6-month emergency fund number sound about enough? Okay, and so, every time that I've spoken about finance, and even in the book, Let's Talk Money, the one thing that I have gone on saying is that it is contextual to who you are. It is personal finance. It is about you, your situation. So for instance, if there is a couple in a government job, these are secure jobs, I would say even a 3-month emergency fund is fine. If, for an average household with a fair amount of income, 6 months is fine. But if you think you're in a sector, hospitality for instance, or airlines, or sectors which are expected to be very badly hit even post-COVID, then I would say you may need to revise that number. And you may need to think about a year of living costs in your emergency fund rather than just 6 months. So it really depends on who you are, what your situation is, what your net worth today looks like, and how secure you feel about the future. So it's really about you feeling secure with your money, with your job, with your cash, and then taking this call. So if you have 6 months, you're very, very secure. But if you are in a sector where you think there's going to be a hit, there's no harm in feeling even more secure and ramping it up to a year. Because COVID it's not a short-term impact. It's going to be with us for many, many years. The impact of this COVID is going to stay with us for a bit.
So if you're saying 1 year, and suppose I have only 6 months of savings or cash in either liquid funds or in my bank, are you saying that liquidate some more and keep it as cash in the bank?
So I am saying that depending upon your situation, the first thing, so people who are feeling insecure, people who have either had a job loss situation, a curtailment of salary or a furlough, or any indication that jobs are not secure, your first step actually even before the emergency fund is to get rid of your debt. Whether it's your EMI or a personal loan or a car loan, whatever debt there is which is being serviced by this current flow of income, I would use my corpus, my surpluses to just go debt-free completely. Now, we have a window on the Provident Fund to withdraw a part of our corpus. I don't like touching my Provident Fund number at all. I don't advocate it. But this is once in a century situation where there is a need to pay off your debt. If you are in a job which doesn't feel secure, if your income is not secure, yes, go ahead, raid that EPF corpus, pick that money out, and please go debt-free. You are going debt-free, and then you are building your emergency fund.
All right. So you're saying that the first call to action is that go debt free. And if you need to liquidate investments or draw out of your EPF or PPF, that is something that you should do. All right. I'm going to now move on to people who actually are not are feeling pretty secure at the moment and actually have investment questions, Monica. So there are lots of people who've send me stock market questions and equity mutual fund questions. In fact, I wanted to ask you the same thing. Financial planners are saying if you've got cash, surplus cash, first of all, you're fortunate. So that's great. You actually should be investing more into equities and stock markets. There is Alok Kumar who said, is equity market good to invest in 2020? Is it a low market situation? Should one invest in equities during this period is what Ashish has asked us. So what's your view on how to seize on the opportunity that the stock market is presenting right now with a 25 to 30% burn that it's already seen?
Right. My view always has been that it's always a good time to be invested into equity. But today, when the markets are 25, 30% down, there couldn't be a better time to, if you are not exposed to equity, to begin an allocation. If you are fortunate to have a lump sum, to stagger and put it into the market. Because remember, we don't know if this is the bottom. We don't know if there's a recession coming or a depression coming. We don't know what lies ahead. But we do know that when you go into the equity market, you do have a 5 to 7 year horizon. And if you do have that and you do not need the money, it's a great time to start staggering your investments into the market. Normally, I say do not go direct, but if there are people who are already direct stock market investors, then you probably know how it works. For pure retail play investors, it is mutual funds that I always recommend. And again, very quickly, you have to have an asset allocation. You cannot not have an asset allocation because that's the thing which keeps you safe. That's the thing which keeps you from having sleepless nights when there's a bloodbath on the markets. And this is also a very good time to decide your asset allocation because when markets are down, we become very risk happy. So, if this is the time that you're feeling that, yes, I should invest, your risk appetite is good, you're doing sensible things, you've got your emergency fund, you've got your cash in the bank and, you're secure. And now you're making an investment. So follow your asset allocation, pick good funds, and then do not worry if markets keep falling for a while. Because the rebound in the economy will happen. We don't know whether it happens in a year, 2 years, 3 years. But when it does, then your money does get the ride up. So great time, absolutely.
So Anika Raja has asked this question. I'm anxious about my mutual fund investments and you just said that don't get anxious. If she is in equity funds, so that's your advice. Don't stop worrying about it so much, isn't it?
No, it is that with what expectation did you enter that product? So again, when markets were on a bull run, it's 35,000, 40,000, 41,000 Sensex. You suddenly had people calling up to say, oh, I'm going to buy small cap. Oh, I'm going to buy mid cap. And then as a person who's writing on personal finance, I'm saying, no, absolutely not. That is not the first mutual fund you pick. So, what is it that you thought when you were entering equity funds? Did you think that you will make quick money in a year? If you thought that, maybe your advice was not right. Maybe what you thought about this part of the market was based on some misconceptions. If your asset allocation was correct, you ideally should not be feeling insecure. And let me give you a small data piece. Through March, when markets were in a bloodbath, we've actually seen equity, SIPs and investments, retail investments go up in India. Now, this is probably the only country in the world where you have a set of mutual fund equity investors who understand this thing of buy when there is fear on the street, and they're actually willing to put their hard-earned money onto it. So again, it's a great time to understand markets and great time to understand that markets go up and down. The Sensex was 100 in 1980 and the Sensex at 40,000 doesn't mean anything because Sensex can be at 1 lakh. It's only a number. It's the underlying economy. It's the profits that companies make. It is the growth potential that is there in the economy and its reflection onto the markets. So please
Mhm.
manage your expectations. This is not a roulette machine. It's not this multi-level marketing emu scheme where you will make a multiplier. This is, it is considered risk. It is risk that you're taking, understanding the downsides. It is a diversified portfolio which will get you to your long-term above inflation and tax returns. That is what equity funds do. It'll give you an inflation and tax plus return.
All
You
right.
do
So
not,
that
yeah, you don't. This is not a roulette machine.
all right, glad to know that, and that's not how you should be treating. But I think Indians are smart when it comes to money. You're saying that we are probably the only country in the world where SIPs have actually gone up during this down phase since March. So Snehal, you've answered Snehal's question where she's asked, are mutual funds better compared to FTs or direct equity? So I mean, I guess, Monica, if you can do equity, you have the expertise, then do it. Otherwise, mutual funds, which are equity mutual funds, would be better.
Correct. Yes. And this, I heard you say fixed deposit or equity. There is no or
Hmm.
in this. It is an and. So if you always have to have equity. So the rule of thumb is, 100 minus your age. So if you're 70 years old, you're still 30% in equity, right? So it's never this. This is never a question. FD or equity.
Mhm.
Always a portfolio, because people who
Okay.
are 40% in debt products, debt funds, or FDs, bonds, and 60% in equity are not so worried today compared to
Mhm.
people who are 100% into equity, right? So you always have both the products. The example that I give again and again is that in a meal, you don't only eat roti or rice or dal, you have a mix of nutrients. Look at your portfolio, please, like that. You have equity for growth, you have debt for stability, you have gold for inflation hedging, and you have cash. So you have servings of different things which give your portfolio different attributes. So it's an and not an or.
All right, that's a really, really interesting answer and very helpful. Abhishek Dubey wants to know whether index funds are better than managed funds over a 5+ year horizon. So answer that, and then I have a very curious question, one more on mutual funds and SIPs, but this one, Monica, index funds versus
Versus
managed.
managed funds. Look, if you have, so I'm sure everyone knows what an index fund is. It simply mimics an index, whether it's a broad market Sensex or a small mid cap index or a sector fund, sector index. You're just mimicking that index. The logic being that over the long term, as the economy grows, the index returns are good, right? So you get your index return because you're buying an ETF. The advantage of an index fund is that you don't have to make a choice on a managed fund. What is a managed fund? A fund manager takes stock calls and tries to give you a benchmark plus return. So if Sensex is giving 12, he'll try and give you 14, 15. That's what an active fund does. For that, you
Mhm.
are charged an expense. Index funds are charging as little as 10 to 15 basis points as expense ratios. A managed fund is anything between 1.5 to 2.5, depending on what part of the market they're in. So it's really about you understanding how to pick a fund and then choosing those products in a portfolio. If you can't do that, and if you don't have the time, an index fund is not only low cost, but it's almost a fill it, shut it, forget it route, where you just are going on putting your money in long term, and you're not considering what you're putting in because you're just getting index return. So you don't worry, you don't look at a small cap fund which is given 48% in a year gone by. You don't get worried about that because that's
Hmm.
managed, right? So you don't get worried about, you then close yourself to returns that other people are making on their actively managed funds. You're satisfied with the decision that you have taken. I'm okay with the average return. It frees up my time to do other things like reading a book, walking the dog, listening to music, and I'm paying a tiny little cost to it.
Hmm.
We in India have something called an alpha still left in the market, which means that fund managers still have elbow room to give you benchmark plus returns. we are seeing that in mature markets, this alpha is going away, and there is a whole whoosh of funds into index funds. I think we still have some distance. Large cap funds in India are getting to that point, but we still have some distance in that extra kicker that fund managers can give. So if you can pick, please go ahead. If you can't, an index fund is a great way for long-term wealth creation.
All right. Very interesting question from a gentleman called Piyush. But before that, let me tell everybody who has joined our webinar, there's a Q&A box there. I know that there are more questions coming in, but please keep typing your questions. Monica will take as many as possible in the next 40 minutes that we've got left. Piyush, Monica, has a very interesting question. I mean, he clearly wants to make a really good amount of money and is also a long-term investor. He says, I'm a long-term investor. Shall I do short SIPs for 6 months, for 6 weeks? Because he believes that 6 weeks you are going to get this market opportunity and then leave it for 5 years.
Okay, so you want to buy a market like that and you're going to do an SIP for 6 weeks. I mean, if you have the funds, yes, 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, this market is not coming back in a hurry at all. So take your time. I would stagger it a little more, because the impact of COVID is going to be with us for a while. There is going to be volatility. So yes, stagger it over 6 months. And if that is what you want to do, you have a lump sum and you want to take that call, absolutely. Please go right ahead. It's a smart strategy.
Okay. We also now have, some funds which invest in the US markets, Monica. So there is a question which Abhishek Goyal said, and pretty much fits in with what you were talking about on asset diversification. He says, how do I hedge today? Is gold better or US dollars or, US dollar based mutual funds?
When especially I talk to retail investors, most of them are taking their first exposure to equity through mutual funds. And I don't think that when you are investing a very tiny part of your overall portfolio, that a foreign exposure does anything much to your portfolio. It just adds to the knowledge that you need to have. So it's a certain size portfolio, it's a certain category of investor who needs that geographical diversification, simply because of the ability to understand what this diversification brings to the portfolio. So your base level of diversification is domestic, but absolutely you must have a global diversification pie to your money. And you do have brokers now who give you direct stocks abroad, but you also have mutual funds which do the same. Gold is a good hedge against inflation, and in a situation like that where people needed suddenly liquidity, gold ETFs came in very useful. So usually it's a 5 to 10% allocation of your portfolio. Again, if you notice, I'm going on saying again and again that there is never a either or. There is a slice of the pie. So gold will be a thin slice of the pie. Your foreign diversification will be a thin slice of the pie. And as your portfolio size increases, your need for diversification will also increase. I'm not sure if everyone will have the ability to do currency diversification and take funds on currency. I would imagine it will be difficult for an average investor to do. So limit your diversification to building a part in gold and a foreign mutual fund which invests abroad.
All right. So we've talked a lot about equity funds. Of course, some people have this question on what are good funds to invest in. On that, I'm not going to grill Monica. There are enough sites where you can actually go and see 5-star rated funds in every category. But I think, Monica, let's shift to debt now. A lot of people are rebalancing their portfolio and are looking at debt options, or if they have extra cash, they do not want to take an equity exposure and are looking at debt funds. So the question that I've just got is asking that how good are debt funds from a 3 to 5 year perspective, and what's your view on balanced funds?
Right. So I actually believe that it is easier to buy an equity fund, and at a certain point an equity fund is lower risk than a debt fund, because equity funds categorizations are very clear. So remember, it is how the product has been defined and what stocks or bonds they are putting into the portfolio, right? So an equity fund SEBI did a cleanup some years back. So a large cap has large cap companies, a mid cap has mid cap, small cap. So the funds are true to label. Now this categorization in debt fund becomes very difficult because it's playing on interest rate changes as well as credit risk. Now what is credit risk? What is credit risk is a company who had borrowed, defaults on interest, and in a very bad case on principal. Now this is so if equity means that the company performs badly, there is a hit on your money. In a debt product, it goes to zero. It becomes an NPA. So the hit on your debt fund is far greater because of a bad paper or a certain part of the portfolio being invested in bad paper. Look at what happened with the Yes Bank paper. Look at what happened with ILFS paper. I would be very, very careful of getting very good advice when I go to debt funds. I would look very carefully. I will match my investing horizon with the horizon of the fund. So if the fund has an average maturity holding of 2 to 3 years, which means the bonds that it's holding, the average maturity of this basket of bonds is 2 to 3 years, right? Because then your risk is aligned with that of the fund. Now, if you buy a long-term bond fund and you're looking at short-term return rates, you're going to be very disappointed because the two are different. You're sitting in a bus going to Noida and you actually wanted to go to Gurgaon, right? So you're completely not understanding that a debt fund is not a product. It's many, many, many products, and you've got to match what you want with a category out there. So one, match your holding period tenure to the product category that is out there. And within that category, look for what is called credit risk. Look for what credit rated paper is sitting in its portfolio. So I would be far more careful about my debt fund portfolio than my equity, because debt funds, when they go wrong or when they take wrong calls, when they stuff bad low credit paper or paper which they think which could have bad outcomes, it really hits your safe part of the portfolio.
I know. In fact, not without mentioning any fund, but recently we had a Vodafone case, isn't it? It was a fantastic fund, but they had to write down the Vodafone debt value to almost zero and hide that out as a separate part. So yes, debt funds have that risk, but AAA rated short duration debt funds, do you think that's the safest category to invest in, looking at the current situation, Monica?
Depending on how long you want to hold your money, if it is for that period of time which matches the fund's period, yes. AAA rated, yes, they are safer products than products which are carrying lower credit rated paper. So yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Then that also brings us back to, most investors who say that, look, we can't actively constantly do our asset allocation. Balanced funds are a good play for them. What's your opinion right now? Are balanced funds the best funds for passive investors to go into?
I would look at my asset allocation in totality and count my PF, my PPF, my FDs as the debt part of my portfolio. So what people do is they have their PF, they have their PPF, their FDs, and then they make an asset allocation over debt funds and equity funds. Don't do that. If you already have 30-40% in your safe PF, PPF, FDs, then your equity exposure fully is coming from funds. Then you don't even need debt funds. But suppose, let's take an example that you still want to buy a balanced fund, you still want to do this allocation between debt and equity. And this is true especially for retired people, where they want to draw a regular income. Then this category called conservative balanced is very useful, where it's 25% equity, 75% debt. And again, you have to see whether the debt part of the portfolio is with good paper. These products work very well. Otherwise, go full equity and do your allocation. It already exists outside. You can have funds for cash because it gives you a little bit more in terms of return. So that becomes a nice allocation of your safe debt, liquid plus equity.
All right. So I think Nanda, you had asked both these questions on debt mutual funds and balance advantage funds. So Monica has taken them. I'm going to take this question from Aditya Gupta. He says, and it's an interesting one because this is a difficult situation for him. He's saying, my family of 4 are in debt of over 45 lakhs. We do not have mutual fund investments and took out loans from LIC policies. We have a retail sari shop for which the revenue is declining. What do we do? My God, that's a tough one, isn't it? All small entrepreneurs are in probably the toughest spot today.
I know. It really is. The small entrepreneurs are really badly hit. If there was ever a time to sell family jewels, this is the time. So this is the time you have to get by this 3-6 month to a year period in which there is going to be social distancing. Even after May 3rd, it isn't as if life is going to go back to normal. I mean, do you think that you would want to go out before being certain that the disease has been kicked? So we are not expecting huge rush of people to go out and start buying immediately. So the tapering sting of this virus is going to last for a while. So, your attempt will be to try and keep the business viable. So it's like what the world has done. You put the economy in a coma so that this storm passes by. You just have enough fluid to keep this thing alive. And then once the storm passes, then we can revive the patient. So you should just you have to ride this time out. And if you have to sell inventory, if you've got to do things to get the cash in to keep it going, that is what you'll have to do. It really is a tough time, yeah.
I know. I mean, small businesses, entrepreneurs, I think our heart goes out to them because those are difficult situations. Okay, we have a lot of public provident fund and NPS situations. One question, of course, Monica, you've already addressed that if you have debt, then dip into these investments and pay off your debt first. But then there is Mohan Gopal Ratnam. He said, should one continue to invest in public provident fund even after the rates have been brought down and income tax rebate has become optional?
If your PPF is the debt part of your portfolio and you do have an asset allocation in mind, then yes. I typically don't like shopping for return to say, oh, PPF rates have gone down, let's move to something which gives us a higher return. You have to learn to think in terms of an asset pie where there is safety with PPF, fixed deposits in scheduled commercial banks. I'm not talking of cooperative banks. Your PF, that is your safe part of your portfolio. Now, whether the rates are higher or lower, actually it makes no difference because you are going for capital preservation with these products. And remember, when PPF rates are coming down, what is this linked to? It's linked to inflation. Your real return is still higher than what it was 7-8 years ago when PPF rates were higher, but inflation was higher than that. Your real return was actually negative, but we never look at returns in terms of real. We look at the nominal return. So in terms of real returns, we're actually getting a better return than we did when PPF rates were 8.5 or 9. So try and see what you are getting above inflation and try and see this part of your portfolio as capital preservation rather than going for return.
Okay. So again, Monica, I think this question on asset allocation is popping up again and again. So what you had given us a thumb rule, minus your age from 100, and that's the amount which should go into equity. So if you're 70 years old, then 30% should be in equities and 70% should be in fixed assets. Is that the formula you would ask everyone to check their asset allocation with?
Rule of thumb, Manisha. Always, it depends. My answer always is it depends. It's a rule of thumb. It's rough. If you have, for instance, an 80-year-old who has no dependents, he's fully financially fit, and he's a rich guy, then he's perfectly okay to be 50% and above in equity because he's got his pension coming in, he's got his income, he's got kids who are fully settled. That rule doesn't work for him. And then on the other side, there's a 30-year-old with dependent parents, a spouse and kids and other extended family. This person's appetite may be there, but capacity is very low. So I would say yes, less equity for you because you cannot take the risk. You have shorter term goals. So yes, as a rule of thumb, 100 minus your age is great, but it's contextual to your situation. So you will have to do that much of work to see where am I, what do I like? Do I like sweet things? Do I like sour things? What upsets me? It's like that. You have to build your appetite for the financial products you have, and then you build a portfolio of these.
So, interesting question. What is the frequency of periodic rebalancing that I should look at? Such and such Dev has asked us this question. So, is it once a year, once every 3 years? When do you really look at rebalancing your asset allocation?
One is a regular. Once every year, you look at it and see where you are. And then at life change, at life situations when there's a change in your life. For instance, you could be retiring and retirement is now 5 years away. That's the time that you're beginning to think of, do I change my allocation? Or something happens. For instance, you lose a job. Is that the time that you then rethink of your asset allocation? Do you want to rush more towards safety? So life-changing events will cause you to look at your allocation. But in a normal course, you're looking at your allocation every year to see whether you're on course or not. And a situation where you need to change your allocation is when markets run on, when there's a bull run, and need 60-40 has gone to 70-30. Now to get yourself to sell your winning equity to buy what is losing debt is the toughest thing to do. But if you're true to your allocation, that is what you would actually do. So today, when equity has lost, this is the time to actually rebalance towards equity, to be buying more equity, to go back to your chosen asset allocation. So once a year, absolutely, then life changes.
All right, interesting answer, Monica. You really have to be brave at this point in time to invest in equities, but that's what you need to do because you would have fallen in terms of equity in your investment portfolio. I'm going to take this NPS question. Mukund has sent us this question and he's saying that is NPS better or as good as other debt options? So NPS also have different schemes to pick from, isn't it? You can go heavier on debt and heavier on equity. So I haven't really understood this question, but there's another follow-up question which says, is NPS the best investment for retirement?
Answer again is it depends. If you're in the organized sector, you're already doing your PF with your company. That's going into the EPFO. There's a small equity allocation there. The need for NPS would be for people in the unorganized sector or self-employed like doctors, lawyers, consultants who don't have their PF corpus building with their employer. So if you already have 24% of your basic, 12 is yours, 12 is your employer's, going towards PF, then why do you want another long-term pension product? You're already doing that. Now, so NPS is great for people who don't have this cushion. Those are the people who should do that. Otherwise, you stay with what you have with your employer.
Okay, very interesting question where two questions, and I think this is something that I'd be very keen to also hear what your views are. One of the question is that given the economic situation right now and all the uncertainty, what is the worst case scenario that we should be prepared for? And of course, do you think that India is likely to scale out or come out of the COVID situation better than other countries?
We always want to be better than the others.
Everyone wants a crystal ball, Monica. Crystal ball game.
My guess is as good as anybody, but let's look at some evidence here. Okay, let's just look at what has happened is that we were very quick to start airport checks. We were very quick to shut down shops, malls, businesses. The lockdown happened very quickly. And some unfortunate incidents have happened which have spread the virus. There have been people who are unwilling to lock down, and that spread. Despite the lockdown, we've still got multiplying cases. But having said that, the incidence in India is lower. the mortality is lower. Whether it's related to the BCG vaccine, that scientific research is still happening, we don't know. But we are hearing this thread more and more that BCG vaccine is providing some amount of immunity to Indians, but we don't know. None of this means that we can let go of the guard. None of this means that we can allow the disease to do what, say, a UK wanted to do, was to build herd immunity, which means you allow it to rage in the country, let people go to work, and then, 500 million people get infected and, 1%, 2% dies. In India, that's millions of people. We don't want to take that call. Because of what we have done, my sense is there is a very sharp, deep shock to the economy. But when we do come out of it, we will probably bounce back. When that will happen, we don't know. Because remember, there is going to be all this repressed demand. There is going to be this, people would want to go to work. We used to complain about work, but now you would want to go to work. You want to do more. So this, it's typical human psychology that you're prevented from doing something, therefore you want to do it. So I would imagine that life will not go back to normal for 12 to 18 months. So forget about foreign travel for 18 months. I don't think the borders are going to open so quickly because we don't want the disease coming in again. So there will be a whole lot of change. And remember, when you do something like this, it's got an effect on hospitality, it's got an effect on airlines, it's got an effect on a lot of the sectors which are linked to all of this travel or all of this businesses. I imagine it's going to take a couple of years to get out of this. But again, as I've said, we're not going back to the caves. We're not going back to bullock carts. We're not in this dystopian world where everything is gone, everything is finished. So let's take this example of a small businessman. So let's say he loses his business, right? So this is devastating. And this is a real life example. Let's say there's this dry fruit guy on Janpat who gets hit and has to shut his shop. And he is now living off the rent of that shop. He's 40 years old. Is for 40 more years, is he only going to sit or will he do something else? He's going to do something else. Whether it's 2 years later, 3 years later, we will come back. It's just a matter of time. You've got to ride it out.
I'm so glad you said that. So Siddharth T has of course sent us 2 questions. I think one you've already answered. The other one, Siddharth, has also been answered by Monica, where you've asked, is my portfolio is predominantly equity. Do I transfer that money into debt funds while the corona and economic crisis continues? I'm now going to toss that question again to you, Monica, because Siddharth, please go ahead and watch the recording. She has taken this question in a lot of detail. All right, Monica, I'm going to now come to the owning a home question. I know that we've always talked about the fact that if you, at least for the longest time, rental income in India did not make enough sense looking at capital prices of homes, especially in large cities, to own one, right? And there were a lot of people who actually did that Excel number and said, hey, listen, I might as well rent, because really if I was to rent, it's only 1.5-2% of the capital cost and I can save the rest of my money. Today, though, the situation when everyone's locked up in their homes, there's uncertainty, people are looking at the value of owning a home. What's your view on that? I mean, once things improve, do you think that owning or at least having one property to call your own is important, or do you think that with the new generation it's not a priority and perhaps they can do without it?
If you're owning it without debt, then absolutely go ahead and buy the house that you will live in. But if it means an EMI versus rent, then you know the answer to that. So suppose you were to buy with an EMI, which is going to be 7 or 8 times the rent that you will pay for the same property, then the answer clearly is rent. But if you're lucky, you've got a rich parent who's going to give you the money and you're going to buy it cash down, then absolutely go right ahead. A roof over your head, even with very little money, is something cherished. But let me take this question a little bit further. Now that we have so efficiently worked from home, I would imagine that we will have far more people working from home. There's a NBER paper, a working paper, which is estimated that a full 34% of American jobs can be done from home. What does this mean for the kinds of homes that we will have? I would imagine that, and this is an argument that I have made, that capital will get deployed in different places as capitalists take these calls of whether to invest in property, commercial property, or in technology, or what spaces they will invest in. I would imagine that possibly for people who want to work from home, we could be investing in either larger homes or homes which are more conducive to work from home. So a lot of shift will happen in that manner. That question of rent or buy is still a valid question. I would say rent if you don't have the money to buy. But if you do have the money to buy, go ahead and buy. And we think that there's going to be more pressure on prices, so you could wait a bit.
Mm-hmm. All right. What happens? I mean, there's a lot of worry that people have in terms of seeing the reds in their equity portfolios, and they probably have not rebalanced at the right time and are sitting on those reds, Monica. Do they just ride it out at this moment?
The worst moment to sell is when there is so much red on your portfolio. So a panic selling is not something I recommend ever, and you know that, Manisha. What I will recommend is that it's a great time to rebalance, to see what products you had bought which did not belong to your original asset allocation. So what happens typically with mutual fund investors is that once they start buying, they cannot seem to stop. And I've seen this in portfolio after portfolio. You start somebody off with a 5-fund portfolio, you turn your back, and in 6 months they've got 15. And so that appetite suddenly increases. So this is a great time to pull out the products which don't belong, and it doesn't matter whether that product has made money or is 30% down, because what you will buy is also 30% down, right? So so don't wait to recover your loss if it is a badly performing scheme which doesn't belong to your portfolio. So don't sell your entire holding, but try and weed out non-performers.
Okay. And that could probably also help you create that emergency fund if you don't have one right now. I mean, you might as well weed out the duds right now.
And,
it doesn't.
And preserve that money. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Very interesting. Is this also not the time for us? We've suddenly realized, Monica, that our expenses can be so little. I mean, we've gone trigger happy online, ordering on Amazon and Flipkart things that we didn't really need. This is a great time to reevaluate not just our savings and investments, but also our spending habits and expenses and all of that.
I think each one of us is looking at our monthly credit card bill and saying, "Oh my God, what happened here?" Eating out is down. Everything that we were spending on. You're absolutely right. And again, I always take a view which is saying that, what are you earning for? We are also earning for today. So is there a balance between, spending what you want to spend and also, saving for the future? So, if that money wasn't hurting, if that spending wasn't hurting, and you've got your investments in place, then guilt-free spending is fine. I mean, I'm not going to take that moral ground to say, no, all spending is bad. No, if you've done your savings, you've been good with your savings targets, investing targets, and there's money, and you like something which is nice and you want to buy, I see no problem. This is what life is about. This is the juice of life.
All right. So reevaluate your saving habits, but then if you put away enough in investments, then absolutely don't worry.
Yeah.
So lots of questions on what funds to buy. Which sites would you recommend people go to look at top category funds in different categories of investment buckets, Monica?
I have a simple rule. Get the funds to pass through several hoops. So there are very, very good ratings out there. We do something at Mint called Mint 50. Look at that. Look at value research, star ratings, look at Morningstar. A lot of investors pass their funds through the 3 hoops to see if they're coming up in the top quartile, if they're coming up in the top of the leagues. Not the top return fund, but in the top quartile, in the top 25%. and then they choose out of that. So that's a sensible thing. I mean, every methodology can have a flaw, but again, what you're trying to do, you're trying to diversify your risk across 3 independent ratings to see which fund actually does well across all 3. So don't believe one. I mean, don't just believe what we do. Try and see whether the funds that we have on Mint 50 hold their nose above water across different ratings. Those are the products to buy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to take this very open-ended question because this has come in. Yoga Anand says, would it be a great idea to invest in this pandemic situation? I think we are coming back to making the most of the opportunities, isn't it, Monica?
If you have the money,
I must say there are lots of brave hearts out there. Hats off to them. I mean, there are people who are worrying, but there are also people who are saying, "Hey, listen, these kind of once in a lifetime opportunities in a crisis are not are rare, and how do we make the most of them?"
correct. And the planners that we speak to, the people in the financial sector, they are saying that a lot of the calls are really about what can I put in now? Where can I put in now? And again, I have to then complement the advisory industry, the IFAs and the financial planners out there who have made the basic literacy so strong. They have done such good work on the ground that people who have entered these products, these portfolios, have understood and then entered. It's not been a hit and run, that you get hit by a product and the seller runs away. This is a whole life cycle of hand-holding where this industry has sort of matured enough so that you've got a sizable number of people. This is 8,000 crore a month of SIP. It's like ₹1 trillion a year. This is not potatoes at all. So I think it's to the credit also of the regulator, because rules have gone on changing to take away this carrot of mis-selling, to take away this idea that you can push high commission products. So both have happened. The product has got cleaner and cleaner. Mutual funds have got extremely clean in terms of their product structure. And you had a whole army of professionals who, I mean, you have to see the difference in the last 15 years of scheme sellers to professionals making financial plans. So it's just fantastic what has happened in India.
All right. In fact, there's Dr. Nripin Daga. I missed this question. I don't know how. He says, shall I be selling my gold and investing this amount in index funds for the next 5 years? My God, that's an interesting call. He can already sense that there is value in the market.
He wants to sell his gold.
Gold, yes. Must have a lot of gold. I mean, a lot of Indian families traditionally do have a lot of gold, Monica.
That's right. But 5 to 10% of your portfolio is gold. If you had over and above that, sell, absolutely, rebalance into equity. Great time to do that. But remember, portfolio is your fundamental rule, that this asset allocation is sacrosanct. If gold has ridden up, sell, reinvest into equity, but don't liquidate gold.
Okay. Okay. HP wants to know, he's not put his full name. When is your next book after Let's Talk Money? I was waiting for this question. I was like, who's going to ask? Should I only ask in my wrap out?
Well, so there are a couple of projects on, and I have to actually just find the time to start writing. But one book definitely is on mutual funds, because where Let's Talk Money left off, the one big question has been, we come to this point, but then we don't know what to do next. So possibly the next one will be on mutual funds. But before that, I'm still hoping that the Hindi edition of Let's Talk Money finally sees its debut on the in the market. We're still hoping it happens fast. So that's the pipeline right now.
Okay, very interesting question, and I'm surprised. Look at the evolution of our investors. I mean, I don't understand this. Govinda Vadva actually says, what about investing in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc.? Must be one of the young guys working at our parks and very tech savvy.
So my golden rule is, if you understand it, invest in it. If you don't understand it, stay away. The question that a colleague of mine had asked me when Bitcoins were on there earlier, 2-3 years back in that bull run. Remember, every 2 weeks the price was doubling. And she said that, how can we say, like, what can we say to people who are saying, look at my 1 lakh has become a crore. What do you say to such people?
Yeah.
So the only thing that I could think of and said is that what is the confidence, with what confidence can you say that 10 years later, there will be an average rate of growth of Bitcoin or crypto? Have any metric by which to judge the intrinsic value of this product? Now, if you ask me, can I judge the intrinsic value of an index or a Sensex? Then I have metrics, I have parameters. I know when volatility is high, I know when the valuation is above the trend line. I know what is constituted that index. I know what sectors are in this index. I can tell you that it's only the top 10 companies which have done well in the index. I know a lot of information about the Sensex and the Nifty 50. I don't know much about cryptocurrencies.
Right.
These are still very opaque, and it is more of a punt than anything else. So, if you have that itch, then you take 1 or 2% of your portfolio and play roulette with a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or whatever else it is. But an investment? No, it's a punt.
Okay. We did touch upon health insurance. Now, I know that most corporates most people who've joined us on this calls are working with companies and have insurance. They have between 2 lakhs to 4 lakhs to 8 lakhs, that sort of a range of insurance that corporates provide. But looking at the fact that, health, this is also a wake up call on a health emergency which has gripped the world. How important is it for us to personally top up health insurance over and above what we get from companies?
Always been my view that company is not for life. You can choose to move on, you can choose to become an entrepreneur, you can get fired. What happens when that happens? Then you have no health insurance and you're out of a job. Always a good idea to buy yourself and your family a basic life health insurance cover. I would say if you're living in a big city, 10 to 15 lakh of your own cover is required. If you find it very expensive, you buy a base level 5 lakh cover. You can keep topping it up later because top-ups are cheaper. But having your own cover at an age when you don't have pre-existing diseases is very important, because as these diseases come because of lifestyle, blood pressure, diabetes, your ability to get that health insurance changes dramatically. And as you get closer to 60, your ability again to get health insurance becomes weaker and weaker. So buy early, buy a basic cover, and do a family floater for yourself, because jobs are, they are here today, they may not be here today, and you must have your own cover.
And health insurance has become extremely reasonable in India. It is not a big outlay to get a good family floater cover of 5 to 10 lakhs, isn't it?
It is. And as you grow older, it's not like life insurance that the premium gets frozen. You will shell out more and more as you age, and it becomes a substantial part. And some people look at 10, 15 years of paying that premium and say, this was money saved. But it takes one event for you to understand the importance of that health insurance cover. So yes, you must have it. Insurance is about that. It could be money down the drain, or when you need it, it is the most important product that you have.
Okay, I'm going to take this final question from probably a very newly married person. Sarika says that what should be the saving and investment plan of a newly married couple? She's not given us any income, but I'm assuming that she must be in her late 20s. So take it from there, just with some assumptions, and I think that's the last question we'll take.
In late 20s, even with both spouses working in average jobs, we're not looking at very high, top IM jobs, but average income, living away from home, living in your own on a rented accommodation, your expenses are likely to be really high. Just basic rent, travel, all of that. If you're already doing 12% of basic in your provident fund, so that's 24% done. And if you're additionally saving 10%, you're okay, right? Because with these limited resources, you can't really starve yourself right now. So if you're just doing the 10% additional, you're fine. Remember, by the 30s, it's going to still be a high expense time. And it's typically around your 40s that you get that big income bump. You've been in the workforce for 10 to 15 years. That accumulated experience begins to build, and most people get this big burst of income around their late 30s to early 40s. That's the time you ramp up substantially your savings ratios. So don't feel guilty if you're not doing more than 10% over above your basic PF deductions.
All right, Monica, I think we've covered so many questions and we've got many thank you notes saying they've really enjoyed the session. I at least enjoyed it all over again. And every time I do a session with you, I just kick myself and say, okay, fine. Now I've at least made 2 of the mistakes that Monica had told me 5 years, 3 years, 2 years ago not to make. But that's human nature. We will still make some mistakes when it comes to savings and investments. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you doing this session for us, and to all of you who joined us on Positive Pulse. Stay healthy, stay safe, take rational, calm decisions. Stick to your asset allocation, as Monica has said. Don't fret too much about equity losses in your portfolio. If you've got the appetite and if your asset allocation allows it, keep buying in small portions in a staggered manner, because we don't know when this will end, but you will at least get a rupee cost averaging on your investments. Thank you so much for joining me, Monica Hallan. Always a pleasure, and we'll wait for the Hindi edition of Let's Talk Money, and of course your next book on mutual funds. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.